today's geography video, we're going to be looking at the uses of water. So how is water used in agriculture, industry, for human hygiene and leisure activities? And then we'll be turning our attention to why there's a surplus of water, as well as water shortages in various areas of the world. So first of all, let's talk about the various uses of fresh water we have. That could be domestic uses, so cleaning ourselves, showering, sanitation, flushing the toilets. We obviously need to drink it, cook our food, and clean ourselves and clean our homes. Industrial uses are largely to do with factory uses. You find that water is often used in cooling plants and the production of goods. Agriculture is nice and straightforward. We're looking at farming, so obviously rice paddy fields need an awful lot of water because they need irrigating fully. Other crops also need watering, and livestock, cows, sheep, etc. all need to be given water to drink. Then leisure activities, things like golf courses, they need an awful lot of watering in order to keep the greens nice and green. We use a lot of water in swimming pools. Now there's a difference between developing and developed countries in terms of their water use. In developing countries, you'll find that a lot of water is used in agriculture, watering crops, whereas in developed countries, most of that water is used in industries, so the manufacture of goods and cooling systems, as well as more domestic uses such as washing, sanitation, showering. We use an awful lot of water in developed countries. Let's define water demand, water consumption. It's the volume of water requested by users for their needs. Water balance is all to do with the difference between water supply and water demand. So countries where there's a surplus means that there is less of a demand compared with supply. Countries where there's a shortage means that there's less supply and greater demand. Negative water balance means that there's water shortages, water supply is less than water consumption. A positive water balance is when there's a water surplus and less water is used compared with supplied. A neutral water balance is where those two figures are roughly the same, so supply and use are the same. But where does our fresh water come from? Well, large quantities of it come from rivers and lakes, reservoirs, which remember are artificially made storages of water, and then lastly aquifers and wells. These provide a good source of fresh water in the form of groundwater, but you will need to drill boreholes and wells in order to access that. In the last 50 years, we've seen a huge increase in the demand for fresh water. Why is that? Well, obviously population growth means that the domestic use of water has hugely increased in terms of sanitation requirements, showering, cooking, drinking. There's obviously been increased agriculture and industry, so more factories being built require more water for their cooling systems. More crops are needed to be planted in order to feed that growing population. They will need watering. More animals, again, in order to feed that population, will need water that they can drink. Linked with that, domestic use. As people's standards of living improve, sanitation improves. So obviously we're talking about flushing toilets, and they need a huge number of litres of water every single time we flush them. Again, as people's standards of living improve, we see more tourism and leisure activities, more golf courses, more swimming pools that need filling, and generally increased urbanisation, which remember is just about building more settlements, will also require more water. So what are the reasons of fresh water deficiencies? Well, obviously that's due to increased demand, all those things we've just talked about, tourism, domestic use. And what you find, as we've already said, is that the use of water exceeds the supply. But why that might also occur could be due to low supply. So that could mean low precipitation, so low rainfall, which means that our lakes, our reservoirs and our rivers aren't replenished. In hot countries, you'll see an awful lot of evaporation from these various water sources. Again, that won't help our supply needs. And if we think about areas where water shortages are very commonplace, it's areas of Africa particularly. We've also got the Middle East, parts of North and South America, depending on the time of year. And India also suffers greatly from water shortages. What about when we have fresh water surplus? So this could be places where water is less used because it could be a lower population, or that the water that they have is particularly well managed. They could also have quite a large supply of water due to lots of rainfall, lots of precipitation, low temperatures, meaning that there's less evaporation. So places you'll find this are Northern Europe, parts of Canada, North America and Russia. So really we want to think of a way in which places with water surplus can supply places with water shortages. So how can that water be brought in? By boat and car, but obviously that's extremely energy using. Pipelines and canals, as well as by hand. So obviously this is in a kind of shorter distance approach, but by hand using bottles and buckets.